Hello, this is FX Radio and I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. And with me in the studio today is Belinda Reynolds, who's a dietitian, a senior presenter and educator and regular writer for FX Medicine, and she's also the mother of two wonderful children. And our topic today is going to be probiotics in pregnancy and the postnatal period. So welcome, Belinda.
Thanks, Andrew.
So tell us, what's some of the more exciting recent research into probiotics during pregnancy?
One of the most exciting findings that I've seen recently is the discovery of a pathway through which probiotics travel from the maternal gut to the uterine environment and also to the breast tissue for incorporation into breast milk. What this research has discovered is that when a woman takes a beneficial probiotic, the beneficial organisms and their DNA signatures have been discovered within the amniotic fluid, within the placenta, and also within the meconium, or the first stool of the newborn. And the way that researchers have uncovered that bacteria are able to reach this uterine environment is via a process where dendritic cells, or those immune cells which sit underneath the epithelial lining of the gut, these are constantly scanning the environment throughout the intestinal lumen. And when they detect the presence of certain beneficial organisms, what they'll do is they'll reach their dendrites through and in between the epithelial cells. So they open up those tight gap junctions between the epithelial cells. And they'll actually grab on to these beneficial organisms and pull them through and down into the lamina propria. Once here, these dendritic cells, which now have a microorganism within them, will travel to the local mesenteric lymph node. Once in that lymph node, the dendritic cells will pass the beneficial organism across to monocytes. These monocytes will then travel with the bacteria through the lymph and pass then into the blood at the thoracic duct. And then the range of hormones and other chemical signals which are produced during the pregnancy and lactational periods, these hormones and chemicals direct these monocytes through the blood to the uterine environment and also to the breast. This process of bacterial translocation has actually been found to be quite upregulated during the pregnancy and lactation periods. And this is obviously in an attempt to increase the passage of good bacteria from the mother to the infant so that their immune system is matured and their gut is colonized with all of these beneficial microorganisms that work to mature the immune system and prevent immune-related disease states. So research then has gone on to supplement pregnant women with a probiotic, and they've found that this can help improve the immune physiology of the placenta and even have beneficial outcomes on the innate immune functioning of the fetus while they're still in utero. So babies aren't born sterile like we previously thought. So this has huge implications for the use of probiotics during pregnancy to begin that process of immune maturation before that infant has even been born.
And indeed, just by being pregnant, the woman changes her microbiota, or the woman's microbiota changes to pregnancy and carbohydrate harvesting and nutrient harvesting, things like that. So it's like, the truly symbiotic relationship between bacteria and the pregnant mother, isn't it? And then, of course, we've still got normal colonisation that we've always thought that happened, vaginal birth, and the vaginal flora smothers the baby and then infects, if you like, the baby and migrates to the gastrointestinal tract. You've got other mechanisms, though, as well. You've got the cytokines and then, of course, that enteromammary pathway that you just mentioned. So it can be really important to modulate all of these sort of things when you're treating conditions with pregnancy. So if we go and explore these conditions now, what sort of conditions can probiotics help to manage during pregnancy?
There's a number of conditions, actually. First of all, you mentioned the pro-inflammatory state which pregnant women can get put into during pregnancy, and also there is that natural shift in the microbiota. And this slight inflammatory state also sees a state of minor insulin resistance. And this is, as you mentioned, designed to maintain a higher level of blood glucose so that it can be shunted towards the baby and also ultimately towards the breast milk as well. But in cases where there is excessive inflammation within that mother, this can potentially lead to the development of gestational diabetes or poor blood sugar control. And the things that can contribute to this excessive inflammation and excessive insulin resistance are things such as poor intestinal integrity. We know that when there's a compromised gut barrier due to nutritional deficiencies or local inflammation or dysbiosis, we have an increased passage of lipopolysaccharides or LPS. These are large molecules that are on the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria. And when we have leaky gut, whether it be due to that inflammation, stress is a big one as well that can cause a leaky barrier. We have an increased passage of these LPS from the gut and into the system. The immune system of the pregnant woman will, as a result, initiate an incredibly amplified immune response to these lipopolysaccharides that are passing through that leaky barrier. And this causes a major increase in that systemic inflammation, contributing to that worsened insulin-resistant state. And therefore, research has proven that probiotics, because of their ability to reduce local inflammation, improve intestinal integrity, and prevent passage of LPS and reduce concentrations of LPS in the gut, are able to reduce that LPS passage, reduce the pro-inflammatory state existing throughout the body, and improve glucose control and reduce that insulin resistance. So what the trials that have been done on the probiotics have found is that through the use of specific beneficial species, we can reduce C-reactive protein, which is a biomarker for inflammation, and as a result, we can reduce the risk of gestational diabetes. And it's even been found that preeclampsia rates are reduced through this use of probiotics, and it's likely that this benefit is obtained because of that, again, reduced systemic inflammation, therefore the reduced oxidative stress and a number of other factors. I should mention there too, though, with preeclampsia, of course, there's a huge range of factors which can contribute to an increased risk of this issue, but it certainly has been found that probiotics are one of those things which can reduce the risk.
And indeed, when you mentioned the invasion of lipopolysaccharide, Bioceuticals has done some previous research using Ultrabiotic 45, which is a multi-species probiotic, looking at reducing the stress-induced lipopolysaccharide invasion. So that brings us to the next question, and you know, from what I hear you say about different bacterial species, that it's not one, there's no one hero. You know, years ago we used to think, oh, we'll just use Acidophilus, and it's the term that still the lay public use. They just think all of this good bacteria is Acidophilus because they don't know about the different species or strains that are involved in that. But there's no one hero, there's no one species or strain that can combat all of these conditions. So can you go a little bit further into these species, you know, the differences that they have and their general actions?
Sure. So, like you said, there is no one hero species or hero strain. What we tend to find is that there's a broad range of different beneficial microorganisms which tend to be more effective for different things. For example, if you look at the research which has been done into preventing the risk of allergies in the newborn and the child later on in life, Lactobacillus rhamnosus is one particular species which has been the subject of a lot of research, and it has been found to have beneficial effects on modulating the immune system. So we know it's particularly good for reducing the risk of allergies, but there's a number of strains within that species which have demonstrated effectiveness. We also know that Lactobacillus gasseri is particularly beneficial in terms of its ability to reduce infection rates. So it has been trialled for Helicobacter pylori, upper respiratory tract conditions, also urinary tract conditions and vaginosis. But it too has even been found, because of the positive effects it has on modulating the immune system, to be beneficial in cases where there's endometriosis, a group of women were given a placebo or Lactobacillus gasseri, and it was found that supplementation with that specific probiotic it significantly improved their quality of life. And this was amazing because there's not much that women with endometriosis have that can improve their quality of life. So that was a really interesting finding as well. If we look to the specific beneficial probiotic species which have been found to be present in breast milk, there's a number of different species which have been identified there, and they include the Lactobacillus gasseri, which we've mentioned, but also the Lactobacillus salivarius and the Lactobacillus fermentum. And these species we therefore believe to be beneficial for both the infant, but also for providing antimicrobial benefits at the breast tissue to reduce the risk of infections there.
So that's a really important point that you make there, because there's been some research on probiotics and its use in mastitis. Can you tease apart the research and give the listeners the important take-home points?
Sure, this is some really exciting research as well. First of all, just to give a little bit of a background, what we know is that breast milk isn't sterile. There's a huge number of both beneficial and potentially pathogenic organisms which exist in breast milk, and this plays a huge role in colonising the infant gut and, of course, therefore maturing the infant's immune system. Now, in the past, it was always believed that the breast milk was sterile and any presence of bacteria was simply contamination either from the infant's mouth or from the skin surrounding the nipple. And researchers set out to uncover whether this was in fact true. And so what they did was that they took swabs from the skin surrounding the nipple, and they also took samples of the breast milk, and they compared the microbial content of each of these samples. What they found was that they didn't match. What was on the skin was very different to what was in the breast milk. They then took again another sample of breast milk and also took a sample of the bacteria that was within the stool of the mother. And they found that there were very clear similarities between the microbial content within both of these samples. And what they took from that was that the bacteria in breast milk has an endogenous origin. It's coming from the mother's gut. They therefore had also looked at the breast milk in healthy women and compared it to the breast milk of women with infectious lactational mastitis. Now, the common culprits of chronic and acute mastitis tend to be Staphylococcus species, and Candida's emerging as a common culprit now as well. And what they found was that when they looked at the breast milk of women who had mastitis, they had very high levels of these Staphylococcus species and pathogenic organisms, and very, very low levels of Lactobacillus species and other beneficial organisms. On the other hand, women that were healthy had really high levels of the beneficial bacterial species, such as the Lactobacilli, but they had very low and almost undetectable levels of the pathogenic organisms. So once they understood this information as well and they added everything together, they started to think, well, clearly mastitis is a disease of dysbiosis. And if that dysbiosis is stemming from the maternal gut, if we're able to correct the dysbiosis in the maternal gut, can these benefits be reflected in the breast milk, and can therefore the mastitis be corrected? And the reason they were looking for a way to effectively treat and, of course, potentially prevent mastitis was that the strains of staphylococcal species, which are often the causes of these mastitis symptoms and the disease, a number of these strains are starting to exhibit multi-drug resistance or multi-antibiotic resistance. And this is making the disease really, really hard to treat. And as a result, a lot of mastitis cases become chronic or recurrent. And this is a problem because recurrent or chronic mastitis is the second leading cause of early weaning in mothers, and that has, of course, implications for the health of the baby and the mother herself. And it is also a contributor to the risk of postnatal depression. So there's a number of reasons why we really wanted to find a good way of preventing and or treating mastitis, and to have uncovered this way to do it naturally is quite amazing. So The first trial took a group of women with infectious lactational mastitis, and these women had already been treated with antibiotics, and the antibiotic therapy had failed. So what they did was that they divided this group of women with mastitis into two groups. First of all, one group was given a placebo supplement, and secondly, the other group was given a supplement which contained 10 billion colony-forming units each of Lactobacillus gasseri and Lactobacillus fermentum. The treatment period for this study was 21 days. However, after just 14 days, the group that were given the probiotic supplement no longer had any clinical signs of mastitis. However, the condition persisted in the group that were on the placebo. So this was amazing. It showed that the probiotics had prevailed where the antibiotics had failed. The researchers then went on to do a larger trial. This one involved 352 women, and they wanted this time to compare a probiotic supplement directly to the use of antibiotics. So these women with mastitis were divided into three groups, and they compared two different probiotic species to antibiotics. So the first group was given 1 billion colony-forming units of Lactobacillus fermentum. The second group were given 1 billion CFU of Lactobacillus salivarius. And then the third group were given an antibiotic. And that wasn't any one specific antibiotic. It was the antibiotic that was prescribed by their general practitioner. So after 14 days, what it was found was that the two separate groups who were given the probiotic had significantly better improvements in their condition when compared to those that were on the antibiotic. So the probiotics, again, were more beneficial than what the antibiotic therapy had been. And interestingly, too, was that a number of the women within the antibiotic group had developed vaginal thrush. So this suggested that the dysbiosis that was present already in these women was being worsened by the use of the antibiotics. This doesn't mean that antibiotics are not necessary at all. There certainly are some beneficial antibiotics that can be used during mastitis. However, it suggests that a probiotic that provides these Lactobacillus gasseri, fermentum and salivarius species could be very beneficial in combination with the antibiotic therapy, or even more beneficial would be the use of these probiotics during the entire mastitis period, the entire breastfeeding period, to prevent mastitis from occurring, because you're avoiding that dysbiosis from even happening.
It seems to me that it tends to be a combination type issue, that it's not one hero strain or species. Is that right? Or
Yeah, so the first trial used a combination of both the gasseri and the fermentum, whereas the second trial did use two individual probiotics, and the individual probiotics were found to be beneficial. However, if we look at the big picture here, the disease of mastitis, the research shows that it's a disease of dysbiosis, and therefore one specific strain isn't correcting that issue of dysbiosis. And therefore, if we go more multi-strain or multi-species, this is more likely to be beneficial for a broader range of individuals. Because even when we look at using specific individual strains, the same strain can actually exert very different effects among different individuals, and this is based on genetic differences, the state of that individual's immune system, their diet, what else is existing within their gut. So this isn't a perfect science, and the best way to improve your likelihood of getting the results that you're looking for is to go broad spectrum, and that way you're correcting that dysbiosis more efficiently to avoid the risk of the diseases that we're aiming to treat. But we designed a product, Ultrabiotic Pregnancy Care, which was based on this mastitis research to look to prevent or potentially treat mastitis. But when we developed the formula, we also wanted to provide the benefit of reducing the risk of allergy in the infant, and that was best done by using Lactobacillus rhamnosus when you looked at the trials, and so we incorporated that species as well. We also wanted to reduce the risk of obesity in the early life of the child, and also ensure healthy growth patterns. And this was shown to be done by a different range and a different combination of beneficial species. We also wanted to know that we were reducing the risk of genital and urinary tract infections during the pregnancy, and reducing systemic inflammation to avoid the risk of the gestational diabetes that we've spoken about, to reduce the risk of preeclampsia. All the benefits that we know that probiotics can provide can't be obtained from just one specific strain. So that is why we decided to use something that was broad spectrum, because the benefits that were likely to be obtained from both the mother and the child were greater.
So let's wrap up on some salient points then. So you've introduced some very interesting concepts there, and I think this is groundbreaking research, and we're seeing it from other groups, from the Spanish now. There's a newer paper out from another group showing this entero-mammary pathway, although the second group didn't sort of elucidate as much as the Spanish group. But we're seeing that entero-mammary pathway, we're seeing a use not just in local gut conditions, but also systemically, so like for women experiencing stress during pregnancy. We're now looking at probiotics for that. What else?
Well, as you mentioned, the probiotics for stress, I mean, the field of psychiatry is starting to look into psychoactive bacteria. They've found that specific strains have the ability to, within hours of supplementation, can change brain chemistry. They can improve GABA functioning and reduce that stress response within the brain. And if we look at depression and other mood disorders as a condition, we know that they're often associated with inflammation. There's a number of ways that systemic inflammation can contribute to a range of mood disorders, both anxiety and depression. And for that reason, using a probiotic to ensure the absence of leaky gut and the absence of that LPS passage, which initiates that chronic systemic inflammation issue, can really help to prevent the stress response and the likelihood of mood disorders developing in the pregnant woman. And what's interesting though as well is that it's been found that when there's high production of stress hormones and pro-inflammatory cytokines during the pregnancy, the infant and then the child's likelihood of developing a mood disorder is increased.
Later on in life,
yeah. So, I mean, we know how common mood disorders are, and if we're able to do anything to reduce the likelihood of these things developing, using a probiotic to reduce that systemic inflammation during the pregnancy, and then ensuring a good amount of bacteria is travelling from the mother to the infant, is going to help with reducing that likelihood of mood disorders developing in the child. Of course, probiotics not the only answer. Other nutrients are incredibly important too. We know vitamin D is absolutely essential. We know essential fatty acids are important. We know that zinc also has quite an important role to play as well. So we're not saying probiotics are the only answer, but they definitely have a significant role to play, and that systemic inflammation and leaky gut or hyperpermeability of the gut is such an important issue for us to address to ensure optimal health of the mother and the child.
Yeah. So things like, people, if you like second gravida, second babies, second pregnancies, ladies that have previously experienced mastitis, ladies who might otherwise be experiencing an increased amount of stress with this pregnancy, ladies who have got a history of endometriosis, and certainly those who have a higher level of atopy or allergy. What else? Urogenital infections?
Absolutely, yes. So urinary tract infections, vaginosis, Group B strep overgrowth is something that's tested for in all pregnant women here in Australia. The presence of the infection itself isn't often an issue to the newborn's health, because any woman who is identified to have a Group B streptococcus overgrowth is given antibiotics during labour. However, if we're able to reduce the likelihood of a mother needing to be given those antibiotics during labour, which we know will compromise their balance of good bacteria, which has all of the implications we've spoken about, we can use a probiotic to improve that balance of good and bad bacteria, both within the bowel and also within the urogenital areas. So the probiotics can definitely be beneficial for a range of the issues associated with the genitourinary tracts.
this is a whole science in itself,
It is.
and it's burgeoning. If you read high-level journals like Nature, there's paper upon paper coming out now, and we're really starting to, tease our way into how these organisms can help human health and how we can sort of use them to our best devices, if you like. But I really thank you for coming in and helping to bring this subject to the light, because it's such an important subject that women during pregnancy are looking for answers.
They are.
So I really thank you for coming in today and talking to us. Thanks once again.
Thank you for having me.
This is FX Radio, and I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook.